Skyrim's 9 walled cities look like they survived the dragon crisis. They didn't. Every single one came out the other side carrying wounds that never fully heal, from political coups to serial killers to Daedric princes quietly feeding on entire populations. Today we're breaking down exactly what happened to every major city after the dust settled, starting with the one that was ground zero for all of it, Whiterun. Whiterun is the most visited city in the game, and on the surface, it looks like the one that made it out okay. Balanced Jarl, central location, legendary warrior guild guarding the gates. But by the time the main story wraps up, Whiterun has been through things it will never fully recover from. Start with Jarl Balgruuf. His entire identity is neutrality. He famously refuses to pick a side in the Civil War, right up until Ulfric forces his hand with an ultimatum. At that point, the city gets dragged into it regardless, and the Battle of Whiterun causes real, lasting damage. Stormcloak catapults bombard the city, homes in the Plains district are destroyed, and the casualties start before the main assault even reaches the gates. If the Stormcloaks win, Balgruuf is deposed entirely. The elderly Vignar Greymane takes the throne, and Balgruuf, his children, and his housecarl Irileth are all shipped off to a basement room in Solitude's Blue Palace. His exit is, "This isn't over, you old fool." And then it just is. He never gets it back. But the Civil War isn't even Whiterun's darkest problem. That belongs to the Companions. Their entire inner council are secretly werewolves, the result of a deal made with the Glenmorill witches generations ago that their founding harbinger didn't fully understand. Every Circle member who has died since then had their soul dragged into Hircine's hunting grounds instead of Sovngarde, the great Nord warrior afterlife, permanently off the table because of a contract signed before they were born. And then there's the thing in Dragon's Reach's basement. Balgruuf's youngest son, Nelkir, is being psychically corrupted by Mephala through the Ebony Blade. Balgruuf actually tried to melt the blade in the Skyforge and the coals cooled around it. Under Mephala's influence, Nelkir starts leaking family secrets, including the fact that he doesn't share a mother with his siblings. The royal family's worst secret, spilled by a child who barely understands what he's saying. Dragon's Reach itself fulfills a purpose. Thousands of years in the making when Odahviing is trapped in its great porch, the same structure built to hold the dragon Numinex back in the First Era. The palace was literally designed for this moment. The skull above the Jarl's throne wasn't decoration. It was a warning about what the room could do. For all its warm lighting and open plains, Whiterun is not okay. It just hides it better than most, but at least it still has most of its walls. Solitude is about to find out what happens when even that isn't guaranteed. Solitude. The first thing Solitude shows you is an execution. A guard named Rogvir walks to the headsman's block for opening the city gates so Ulfric could leave after killing High King Torrig. His last words are that there was no murder, that Ulfric challenged Torrig in fair combat according to Nord tradition, and that he goes to Sovngarde with no regrets. Then the axe falls. He never appears in Sovngarde. Make of that what you will. Solitude is Skyrim's wealthiest city, the seat of imperial power in the province, home to the Bard's College, the East Empire Company, and the only temple that worships all 8 divines under a single roof. There's even an empty alcove where the Shrine of Talos used to stand before the White Gold Concordat forced its removal. The whole city is a picture of imperial stability, but here's where it gets weird. The court wizard who has served Solitude for decades, Sibyl Stentor, is a vampire. She's been one long enough that nobody alive remembers when she wasn't. The cook Odar notes he's never once seen her eat. Castle Dour's dungeons sit directly below the palace, and there are strong implications she's been quietly feeding on prisoners there for years. Nobody has said anything. Nobody will. Jarl Elisif the Fair is a young widow still grieving Torrig, and her steward Falk Firebeard is doing most of the actual governing while she finds her footing. Cut dialogue reveals she doesn't actually hate Ulfric the way everyone expects her to. She's just lost. The Wolf Queen Potema, one of Tamriel's most dangerous necromancers in history, and Solitude's former ruler, had her spirit nearly resurrected by a necromancer cult in Wolfskull Cave during all of this. The player eventually has to destroy what's left of her in the Solitude catacombs. The city was almost overrun by an undead army while its Jarl was too grief-stricken to notice. Then the Dark Brotherhood kills the Emperor. Not in Solitude, technically, but it starts there, with his cousin Vittoria Vici assassinated at her own wedding in full view of half the city. If the Stormcloaks take Solitude, Ulfric lets Elisif keep her title as long as she cooperates. The Shrine of Talos gets restored. General Tullius gets executed. executed. Legate Ricca refuses to surrender and dies for it. The city survives, but it has a vampire in the court, a Daedric mad emperor in its sealed West Wing, and a succession crisis nobody has resolved. And somehow that's not even the most politically complicated city on this list. Windhelm. Windhelm is the oldest continuously inhabited human settlement in all of Tamriel. Ysgramor founded it after his son Ingol died crossing from Atmora, built it as a monument to mankind's dominion over Skyrim, and forced captured snow elves to construct it. According to the records, roughly as many elves died building Windhelm as were killed by Ysgramor's crew before they ever arrived. The city's origin is a war crime disguised as a monument. 4,000 years later, Windhelm is still doing that. The first thing you see entering the city is two Nord men cornering a Dunmer woman in the street, calling her a stain on the city, telling her she isn't wanted. The Dark Elves in Windhelm live in the Grey Quarter, a blighted ghetto formerly called the Snow Quarter before someone decided to rename it after their skin color. Argonians aren't even allowed inside the walls by Ulfric's direct order. They live in a dock settlement outside the city, paid a fraction of what Nord workers earn for the same labor. This is the Stormcloak capital, the movement fighting for Nord freedom. Here's the thing about Ulfric that nobody talks about. The Thalmor have a dossier on him, not because he's their agent, but because his rebellion is useful to them. The document explicitly states the Stormcloak uprising keeps the Empire destabilized and prevents it from properly rearming for a second Great War. Ulfric isn't a Thalmor puppet, but he is, functionally, their most valuable asset. He just doesn't know it. And then there's blood on the ice. While all of this is happening politically, a serial killer named Calixto Corium has been murdering women across Windhelm for years. He runs a curiosity shop as cover. His journals detail the specific body parts he's collecting to resurrect his dead sister using ancient necromantic flesh rituals. He even sells tours of the shop. He points to what he claims is Ysgramor's soup spoon and jokes that it looks more like a fork. The man is out here harvesting corpses and running a guided museum experience. If the Imperials win the Civil War, Ulfric and Galmar Stonefist are killed in the Palace of the Kings. Their bodies stay there permanently. Brunwulf Free Winter takes over as Jarl, a man who genuinely wants to help the Dunmer and Argonians. But even he admits the city's hatred runs too deep to fix quickly. The Argonians stay outside. Progress is slow when the prejudice is structural. Windhelm is a city that has been treating the people inside it as lesser for 4,000 years. A new Jarl doesn't change that overnight, but at least Windhelm's problems are out in the open. Markarth buries everything, and what's underneath is worse. Markarth. The first time you walk into Markarth, a man gets stabbed in the marketplace. A forsworn agent named Waylon drives a blade into a woman in broad daylight, while guards stand 20 feet away. As he dies, a guard delivers what has to be the single most ironic line in the entire game. Safest city in the Reach. Markarth is built inside the ruins of a Dwemer stronghold called Nchuan Zell, carved directly into the mountain. The Dwemer vanished around the First Era and the Reachmen moved in. Then, the Nords pushed the Reachmen out. Then, during the Great War, when the Imperial legions withdrew, the Reachmen took it back for 2 years under their king Madanak. And then Ulfric Stormcloak's militia retook it with the Thu'um, threw Reachmen off the walls, and executed every official even after they surrendered. Women were tortured for information. People who hadn't even fought were killed if they were deemed old enough to hold a sword. That was 25 years before the events of the game. The Forsworn have been bleeding Markarth's roads ever since. But here's where it gets complicated. The Silverblood family, Markarth's wealthiest clan, secretly controls the Forsworn through Madanak, who is still alive in Sidnamine, the most feared prison in Skyrim, where prisoners mine silver around the clock and eat only when quotas are met, is run by a private family as a labor operation. The Jarl knows none of this. The guards are on the Silverblood payroll. The Forsworn threat that justifies the prison's existence is being deliberately maintained by the same people profiting from it. When you start pulling on this thread, a corrupt guard frames you and throws you inside. Zero bounty, zero trial. And then there's everything else Markarth is hiding. A Molag Bal shrine in an abandoned house where the Daedric Prince of Domination makes you beat a priest to death repeatedly until he breaks. A cannibal cult operating inside the city walls, with members who include a market merchant, a dog seller, and a shopkeeper who may or may not have eaten her husband. The Thalmor agent Ondalemar runs his Talos enforcement operation directly out of the Jarl's keep, while the Jarl's own steward is secretly a Talos worshipper who can be blackmailed into feeding military intelligence to the Civil War questline. If the Stormcloaks win, Thongvor Silverblood becomes Jarl. The family that already owned the prison, the guards, and half the city now has the throne too. It is the single most complete consolidation of corrupt power in any city in the game. Markarth doesn't have a problem. Markarth is the problem, all the way down. Riften at least has the decency to admit what it is. Riften. Riften doesn't pretend to be something it isn't. The moment you walk through the gate, a man man tries to shake you down for an entry fee that doesn't exist. A guard standing 10 feet away watches it happen and says nothing. That's the whole city in one interaction. Riften was once a legitimate trading hub between Skyrim and Morrowind. Then a tyrant jarl named Hosgun Crossed Daggers ran it into the ground for 30 years. The city revolted, someone burned his castle down, and the fire took the entire city with it. It was rebuilt from scratch. And somehow what grew back was worse. The real ruler of Riften is Maven Blackbriar. She doesn't hold the title of Jarl, but she doesn't need to. She says it herself, openly. To anyone who asks, nothing gets done without her approval. She has the Jarl's ear, the guards in her pocket, the Thieves Guild on retainer, and a direct line to the Dark Brotherhood for when she needs something more permanent handled. In the locked basement of her manor sits a Black Sacrament setup, a skeleton, a human heart, Nightshade, and a letter to the Brotherhood complaining about how long a contract is taking. Maven Blackbriar is running a city, a criminal empire, and a murder operation simultaneously, and the Jarl has no idea. Jarl Layla Lawgiver genuinely believes Maven is helping keep the Thieves Guild in check. That quote is real. She said it. If the Imperials win the Civil War, Maven becomes the official Jarl of Riften. The person who was already running everything gets the title to match. Her son becomes steward. Her enforcer becomes housecarl. And here's the detail that makes it perfect. If the Stormcloaks later reclaim Riften, Maven is the only deposed Jarl in the entire game who doesn't get exiled. Every other displaced Jarl gets shipped off to a palace basement. Maven just goes back to her manor and continues exactly as before. She is untouchable, regardless of who wins the war. Beneath the city, through the Ratway sewer network, sits the Thieves Guild, or what's left of it. The guild has been in decline for 25 years because Guildmaster Mercer Fry murdered his predecessor, stole a divine artifact called the Skeleton Key from the goddess Nocturnal's shrine, and used it to drain the guild's luck while embezzling the treasury. The decline wasn't bad management. It was a literal curse. Nocturnal withdrew her favor the moment the key left the Twilight Sepulchre, and every job the guild ran afterward went slightly, consistently wrong for over 2 decades. The woman who knew the truth, Carlia, spent those same 25 years in exile after Mercer framed her for the murder. She waited, she gathered evidence, and then the Dragonborn walked into the Ratway. Down the canal from all of this sits Honor Hall Orphanage, run by a woman named Grelid the Kind. Her nickname is not ironic by accident. She denies the children basic comfort, threatens them regularly, and has explicitly revoked their right to be adopted. Killing her carries no bounty. The children celebrate. Riften runs on corruption so deep it has its own ecosystem. Maven at the top, the Thieves Guild underneath, the guards bought and paid for, and a Jarl in the middle who thinks she's in charge. At least Winterhold lost its corruption to the sea. Most of it. Anyway, Winterhold. Every other city on this list is dealing with the consequences of something people did. Winterhold is dealing with the consequences of something nobody can fully explain. In its prime, Winterhold was one of Skyrim's greatest cities. Rivals with Solitude for political influence, home to a thriving port, enriched by Dunmer refugee scholars who brought entire rescued libraries with them when they fled Morrowind. Then in 4E 122, violent storms hit the northern coast for nearly a year, and most of the city just fell into the Sea of Ghosts. Entire districts, the Jarl's family, gone. The population never recovered. But here's what nobody has a clean answer for. The College of Winterhold, sitting on its rocky promontory above the city, was almost completely untouched. The same storms that swallowed the rest of Winterhold left the college standing without serious damage. The Archmage at the time said it was just the protective enchantments on the building. The townspeople said that was exactly what a guilty mage would say. 4 competing theories exist, and none of them are fully satisfying. The college officially blames Red Mountain's eruption. The problem is Red Mountain erupted in 4E5, which is 117 years before the collapse. The timeline doesn't hold. Jarl Courier insists the college caused it directly, though he has zero evidence. A third theory points to Thalmor sabotage, given their documented history of engineering large-scale catastrophes to weaken their enemies. The fourth connects to the Eye of Magnus, which the research outline flags as speculative. The actual answer is that nobody knows, and the game never tells you. What's left of Winterhold by 4E201 is barely a city at all. A longhouse, an inn, a general store, and the college. There is no blacksmith, no alchemist, no jail either. Criminals get sent to a cave called the Chill, guarded by 4 frost atronachs. It snows constantly. The Clear Skies shout doesn't work there. It is the only hold in Skyrim where you cannot buy or build a home through any means in the base game or either DLC. The college itself is rotting from the inside during all of this. A Thalmor agent named Encano is embedded in the faculty. The Archmage ends up dead. And beneath the building, a former student named the Augur of Dunlane exists as a formless ball of energy after a magical experiment destroyed his body. He still answers questions. The college just quietly decided to keep him down there. If the Imperials win the Civil War, Corir is replaced by Kraldar, who actually wants to repair the relationship with the college. It is the most optimistic political outcome for any city in Skyrim. The townspeople's resentment barely shifts. Winterhold lost most of itself to the sea over 100 years ago and is still waiting for an explanation. It is probably still waiting. Dawnstar's problems are fresher, and somehow more exhausting. Dawnstar, every single person in Dawnstar is having nightmares. Not metaphorically. Literally every citizen, every guard, every miner wakes up shaking. The Daedric prince, Vermina, has been using an artifact called the Skull of Corruption inside Nightcaller Temple, on the clifftop above town, to drain people's memories while they sleep. Nobody in the city knows why it's happening. They just know they can't rest. The priest tasked with stopping it is a Dunmer named Erendur, and his connection to the temple is not accidental. He used to be one of Vermina's cultists. He was recruited as a child, spent years in her service, and was personally responsible for releasing the miasma, a sleep gas that put the entire temple into suspended animation when Orcish raiders attacked. He released it, then ran, left every one of his brothers behind, spent years afterward becoming a priest of Mara out of guilt. The quest takes you inside his past. You drink a potion that lets you experience the temple's history through his eyes. And at the end of it, Vermina speaks directly into the Dragonborn's mind, trying to manipulate you into killing Erendur at the moment he becomes most vulnerable. The prince literally invades the player's head to protect her artifact. That's how much the Skull of Corruption matters to her. Once that's resolved, Dawnstar still has the mythic Dawn Museum. An Imperial citizen named Silas Vesuvius runs it out of his house, dedicated to the cult that murdered Emperor Uriel Septim VII and triggered the Oblivion Crisis 200 years ago. Silas is a direct descendant of one of the assassins. His displays include robes dyed with sacrificial blood and pages from the Mysterium Xarxes. His court wizard confronts him about it. He does not care. His family did this. He's proud of it. The quest ends at Mehrunes Dagon's shrine, where the prince demands Silas die to reforge his razor. If you spare him, Silas has a rare moment of self-reflection. He admits the whole adventure scared him straight, a mythic Dawn descendant, humbled by his own Daedric quest. It's almost touching. Jarl Skald the Elder has been running the Pale for over 35 years, and is nearly universally despised. His own court wizard and housecarl, both great war veterans, openly disagree with his Stormcloak politics. The mine owner calls him a brat. If the Imperials win, retired legate Brina Marilis replaces him, which locals treat as an enormous relief. The Dark Brotherhood relocates to the Dawnstar Sanctuary after the Falkreath base is destroyed. Nazir, Babette, and the Night Mother's coffin end up here. The last surviving Assassin's Guild in Tamriel makes its final home in a city where everyone has been awake for days, too afraid to close their eyes. Nobody in Dawnstar is sleeping well. They never really were. Falkreath has a different relationship with death. It just made peace with it a long time ago. Falkreath's graveyard is larger than the town itself. That's not a figure of speech. The cemetery physically occupies more space than the living settlement surrounding it. The loading screen explains it plainly. So many battles were fought here over the centuries that graves were dug, monuments were raised, and eventually a town grew up around all of it. The dead were there first. The living just moved in. Every business reflects this. The inn is called Dead Man's Drink. The alchemy shop is Grave Concoctions. The general store is Grey Pine Goods. The farm is Corpselight Farm. Falkreath didn't stumble into its identity. It leaned in completely. When you arrive, a funeral is already underway for a child named Lavinia, killed by a werewolf named Sinding who stole the ring of Hircine, hoping it would help him control his transformations. Hircine cursed the ring specifically because he stole it, and during a random shift, Sinding killed the girl. The quest that follows takes you to Bloated Man's Grotto, where you either kill Sinding for Hircine or spare him, becoming prey in a divine hunt yourself. A Daedric prince using a grieving town's tragedy as a setup for sport. But here's where it gets weird. The second Daedric quest also originates in Falkreath through a blacksmith named Lod who asks you to find a stray dog on the road. The dog is Barbas, the supernatural hound companion of Clavicus Vile. 2 Daedric quests, one tiny town built on a graveyard. That is a concentration of Daedric activity that rivals cities 3 times its size. Jarl Siggeir is young, lazy, and almost certainly corrupt. His very first request is to eliminate a bandit leader, which is suspicious, given he also wants a specific bottle of Blackbriar Reserve as payment, suggesting connections that go in directions a Jarl's shouldn't. His uncle Dengeir was the previous Jarl before the Imperials had him removed, and Dengeir has never stopped being furious about it. He's convinced there are spies bodies everywhere. He's also correct that his own ancestor Vigar is a vampire living in a nearby cave, which is not nothing. The Altmer priest of Arkay, Runil, carries a secret that reframes his entire presence in the most death-saturated town in Skyrim. He was a Thalmor battle mage in the Great War. He killed people with magic. His journal records dreams about the return of dragons. He is hiding from the Thalmor in a graveyard, serving the god of death, asking the divines to forgive him for the bodies he put in the ground. There is no more fitting penance in all of Skyrim. Just west of town sits the Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary, the last refuge of the last Assassin's Guild in Tamriel, hidden behind a skull-shaped door with a bloody handprint and a heartbeat you can hear from outside. The Penitus Oculatus destroys it during the questline. Festus Crex is found pinned to a tree. Falkreath is where things come to end. Guilds, soldiers, guilty men trying to outrun what they've done. Morthal is different. The things in Morthal don't end. They just wait. Morthal is the capital of Hjalmarch, one of Skyrim's poorest holds, and it looks exactly like that. Fog so thick you can't see across the marshes. Twisted dead trees, mud paths between a handful of buildings. The city doesn't have walls so much as it has a general understanding that nobody wants to come here. Jarl Idgrid Ravencrone governs through visions. She believes they come from the divines. The official game guide confirms she and her daughter are unconsciously channeling magicka to produce them, which means they are not divine in origin, and she has no idea. Her son Jorik has the same ability, and it's tearing him apart. Her housecarl Gorm, the man sworn to protect her, is secretly writing letters to Captain Aldous in Solitude exploring the possibility of having her removed from power. Her own household is working against her, and yet she is, genuinely, one of the most perceptive Jarls in Skyrim. When you report strange activity in town, she doesn't panic or dismiss it. She just says the spirit world is strong in this place, and moves on. She's right, by the way. There is a burned house on the edge of town. Everyone knows about it. A man named Hrogar lost his wife and daughter in the fire, and within days he moved in with a woman named Alva. The townspeople think he said it himself. They are wrong about who did it, but not about what happened. Here's the truth. Alva is a vampire, sent to Morthal by a master vampire named Movarth Pekin with a specific objective: seduce the guards one by one, turn them into thralls, then convert the entire town into a blood farm. She turned a woman named Leolette into a vampire, and ordered her to burn Hrogar's house with his family inside to remove an obstacle. His wife and daughter died to protect a feeding operation. The daughter, Helgi, is still there. She died in the fire and exists as a ghost, and she wants to play hide and seek. She leads you to her grave on the hillside. At night, Leolette attacks there. A vampire who couldn't bring herself to fully leave the child she was ordered to kill. There are implications she wanted to turn Helgi instead. Keep her. A dead woman who burned a little girl now haunts her grave, unable to let go. Movarth himself has a history that makes the whole thing darker. He was one of the most successful vampire hunters in Tamriel, a Fighters Guild specialist who studied them so obsessively and thoroughly that he eventually became one. The hunter became the thing he hunted. He then spent decades building toward a plan to enslave an entire town, and when the townspeople finally work up the nerve to march on his lair, they lose their courage at the entrance and refuse to go inside, except for one man, Thonir, whose wife Leolette was turned. He goes in. Morthal also has Falion, the only person in all of Skyrim who can cure vampirism. He sneaks out to a summoning circle in the marshes between 1 and 5 in the morning every night, and the townspeople whisper about what he's doing out there. His young ward has bad dreams about him going away and making monsters. This is a city where a vampire nearly enslaved the whole population, where a ghost child plays games in the fog, where the Jarl rules by visions she doesn't understand, and where the one man who can cure the undead goes out alone into the dark every single night. Morthal survived everything. It just didn't come out clean, and neither did any of these cities. Every single one of them, from Whiterun to Morthal, came through the Dragon Crisis carrying something they didn't have before: a deposed Jarl in a basement, a vampire in the court, a serial killer's legacy, a graveyard that keeps getting bigger. Skyrim saved itself from Alduin. It just never quite saved itself from everything else. If you enjoyed this video and want to see every Skyrim faction explained, click the video on the screen now.